Welcome to Recap King. In this video, we will explain Clean. This movie tells the story of a garbage man, tormented by his past, and attempts a quiet life of redemption, but soon finds himself forced to reconcile with the violence of his past when a local crime boss is after him. Can he fight back? What is the real identity of this garbage man? Let's find out in Clean. Clean begins by showing a man nicknamed Clean, a garbage man who works every day, transporting garbage in urban residential areas controlled by gangsters. After finishing his job, Clean usually collects some scraps that might still be of use, then repairs and sells them to a thrift shop owned by one of his acquaintances. Since divorcing his wife, Clean has lived alone in a workshop, while his daughter has long since died of illness. Clean always remembers his daughter, and the memories somehow torture him because Clean always blames himself for what happened to his beloved daughter. Therefore, Clean tries to make amends by paying attention to his neighbor, a teenage girl named Diana, who is an orphan and only lives with her grandmother. Meanwhile, in another place, a man named Michael is seen waiting for his son, Mikey, in front of the prison gates because his son will be released today. However, Mikey was picked up by his friends, and he preferred to go with his friends rather than with his father. Michael seemed annoyed with his son's behavior, but chose to let it be. In the evening, while picking up trash in the area, Clean saw Michael and some of his men doing a little suspicious activity in front of Michael's restaurant. Moreover, Michael and his men were also seen carrying weapons at that time. However, Michael did not want to bother and continued to do his job as usual. In addition to running a restaurant business, Michael turned out to be doing an illegal business, namely drug trafficking smuggled from China. The drugs are smuggled in by hiding in the fish's body, then Michael will mix them up before being sold to the market. That night, Michael seemed annoyed because the package sent by the seller from China was not following the agreement, so Michael was at a loss. The next morning, Clean saw Diana going to school on foot. Diana told Clean that the school bus was no longer operating in the area, and her grandmother's car was breaking down, so she had to walk to school. Clean then offered to take Diana to school. After that, Clean gave a second-hand bicycle belonging to his late daughter to Diana and secretly placed it in front of the girl's house. But Diana's grandmother, Ethel, found out about Clean's actions and left the house. The woman then asked why Clean was so concerned about her granddaughter. Clean only said that he did it to save himself from the guilt that always tormented him. Ethel then told Clean that he is a nice guy. On the other hand, Michael, who was conducting a drug trade transaction, was again annoyed because the sellers from China were again sending packages that were not following the agreement. Michael, who could no longer contain his anger, then beat the courier brutally until the man died covered in blood. Mikey, who saw his father's actions, was silent in horror at his father's cruelty. Michael is not only a crime boss who is respected by gangsters, but he is also quite influential in the area, so he doesn't hesitate to kill someone on a public street during the day. That night, when Clean was about to pick up the trash in Michael's restaurant trash can, the man was startled by a very strong stench and fresh blood splattered everywhere. Clean, who was curious, then tried to find out where the stench came from, but then Michael appeared right behind him. Michael then gave Clean some money to clean up the mess he had made this afternoon. However, Clean refuses and chooses not to get involved with Michael, then returns to his job of picking up trash. One day, Clean's car broke down in the middle of the road as he was on his way to work. Not long after, Clean saw a man being chased by a group of thugs. The thugs managed to catch the man and corner him in a small alley. They then ganged up on him. When Clean was trying to help the man, suddenly one of the thugs appeared behind Clean and immediately hit him on the head until he passed out. Sometime later, Clean finally woke up and realized that he was in the hospital. A doctor later told Clean that the wound on his head was quite severe and Clean was very lucky to be alive. The doctor advised him to continue outpatient and prescribe some medicine, but Clean refused and chose to go straight home. On the way home, Clean met Diana, who was gathering with the young delinquents in the area. Worried about the girl's safety, Clean then asked Diana to come home immediately, but Diana said that Clean had no right to order her because he's not her dad. Then the young delinquents kicked Clean out violently. Even though she initially refused, Diana finally complied with Clean's request and immediately left the delinquents. On the other hand, Michael gets into a heated argument with his son at dinner, where Michael is furious that Mikey is more concerned with having fun with his friends, rather than helping him run a drug business. The quarrel between father and son was so heated that Mikey decided to threaten his father with a knife if he continued to insult his friends. Mikey then decided to run away from home that night. Meanwhile, Clean found Diana's bicycle parked in front of an empty house that was used as a base camp by young delinquents. When Clean went in there, he saw Diana being force-fed with drugs and alcohol and also being harassed by the young delinquents. The delinquents even deliberately recorded their actions and intended to pass them on to their other friends. Without thinking, Clean immediately beat the thugs with an iron pipe indiscriminately. After beating them all, Clean just realized that Mikey, Michael's son, was one of the young delinquents he had beaten so badly that he was seriously injured. Clean immediately took Diana away from there, before his actions were caught by the police and also Mikey's father. After undergoing treatment in the hospital for several days, Mikey finally returned home. The doctor who treated him then told Michael that Mikey's body would recover, but his face would not be able to return to the way it used to be because the damage was too severe, so the only way was to do plastic surgery. Not only that, Mikey can't speak normally anymore, because his vocal cords have been damaged. The doctor advised Michael to immediately perform surgery because if it was delayed too long, it would increase complications in Mikey's other organs. However, Michael apparently had no intention of curing his son, and chose to let his son's condition be like that to reward Mikey because he never listened to his parents' words. Not long after, a police officer named Frank goes to Michael and tells him about the video footage the police found at the scene of his son's beating. In the video, it is clear that Clean was the perpetrator of the beating. Realizing that Clean has a close relationship with Diana and her grandmother, Michael then orders Frank to kill them both, then brings Clean alive before him, which indicates that Michael has controlled the police in the area and controlled them for his own interests. Meanwhile, Clean, who had known that Michael would take revenge for what had happened to his son, then rushed to take Diana and her grandmother to leave the city and go as far as possible. But on the way, Clean was forced to pull over for a moment when a police car sounded a siren and signaled him to stop. Clean had thought about turning himself into the police so that Diana and his grandmother could be saved from Michael's men. But then, Clean realized that Michael had conspired with the police, so Clean decided to step on the gas and immediately ran away from there. After escaping from the police, Clean then stopped by a restaurant. When Diana and her grandmother headed to the toilet, Clean broke into the door of one of the cars parked there and intended to flee in the car to eliminate the trail of the police and Michael's men. However, at the same time, Michael's henchmen saw Clean's car parked there and headed straight to the place. Diana and Ethel, who know the presence of Michael's men at the entrance, then try to escape and find a hiding place or other way to get out of there. Clean, who noticed the arrival of Michael's men, then infiltrated through the back door. Clean managed to kill some of Michael's men and found Diana and her grandmother hiding in the warehouse. Because Diana and Ethel had witnessed how Clean brutally murdered Michael's men, Clean finally revealed to Diana and her grandmother that he was a former professional assassin. But after his daughter died, Clean decided to retire from his job and secluded himself in the city. Clean then works as a garbage man to avoid people's suspicion of his background as a ruthless hitman. After taking Diana and her grandmother to a safe place, Clean then returned to his residence to collect some equipment and all the money he had. After that, Clean went to his friend's shop and bought some weapons needed to fight Michael and his henchmen. Meanwhile, Frank, who is at Michael's house, tells Michael that Clean is not a random person, but a former assassin who is nicknamed the Angel of Death because of his brutality. After that, Michael received a call from Clean, saying that he would be coming to him soon. Knowing that the Grim Reaper will come after him, Michael then gathers all his men and prepares all the weapons needed to deal with Clean. On the other hand, Clean is also preparing to launch its action with various weapons that have been modified and also the equipment needed. After everything was ready, Clean rushed to Michael's house by driving a garbage truck. Without any warning, Clean then crashed the garbage truck right into Michael's big house. The power in the house suddenly goes out, but Clean is able to act in the dark and kill all of Michael's men effortlessly. When Clean was about to look for Michael's whereabouts, he was surprised by Michael's appearance from inside the cupboard. They had a fierce fight, but Clean could knock out the man in no time. Just as Clean was about to kill Michael, Mikey suddenly appeared and pointed a gun at him. Seeing this, Michael seemed happy because he thought Mikey would kill Clean. But then, Mikey instead shot his father, killing him. When Mikey was about to shoot Clean, his bullets had run out, so Clean managed to survive. The film ends by showing Diana, who is pedaling her bicycle on the city streets, which is now free from the disturbances of the delinquents and mafia. Diana then stopped for a moment and smiled when she saw the garbage truck driven by Clean approaching her. The moral of this film is never to get into trouble with a hitman who is retired and trying to find peace.